Hello, and welcome to the latest podcast produced by the Schuman Trainees of the European Parliament. I'm Natasha Burton.
And I'm Simone Wegman. With this series, we'll bring you up to speed with the latest issues the EU is facing, broadcast right here from the heart of the European Parliament.
We hope you enjoyed our last podcast, which focused on the environment. Today we'll be discussing the issue which has divided the British population and will divide the European Union, Brexit.
We are lucky enough to be joined today by MEP for South West England and Gibraltar, Julie Girling.
Hello.
Julie Girling's been a member of the European Parliament since 2009 and has been a strong opponent of Brexit since at the beginning, even switching parties last February due to her anti-Brexit stance.
Thank you so much for joining us, Julie.
Thank you. So this month we've seen a lot of headlines about the possibility of a no-deal situation. How likely do you think it is that negotiations will be completed by March, and if so, how?
Well, I think it's important to remember that for the UK to leave the European Union on the 29th of March, the negotiations have to be complete probably by the end of October, because there's a number of administrative and legislative hoops to go through. For example, we have to have it voted in this Parliament, but then also through the UK Parliament, and indeed through 27 parliaments. In fact, it's more than that because some of the regional parliaments in Europe. So it really has to be completed by the end of October. My understanding is that it could slip maybe till the end of the year at the absolute latest. And how much chance do I think there is of that happening? I think it's looking extremely difficult at the moment. The thing is, though, there's a lot going on behind the scenes, a lot of negotiation, but nothing that can be ever firmed up because nothing is agreed till everything's agreed. How quickly that cascade would flow once the positions are unlocked, it's impossible to say. But I don't know, I'm increasingly thinking that it's just not going to happen in time.
So what would you tell to the young people like us who want to remain in the UK post-Brexit? Do you have any recommendations on what we should do next?
Well, it's difficult because, again, nothing's been finalised. But if I was an EU 27 national now and I wanted to live in the UK after Brexit, I'd make sure I was in the UK on the 29th of March and registering, because it seems to me that that's going to be the key. My personal view is that the transition period, if there is one, problem is, of course, we don't know if there will be one, but if there is one, you will be able to move to the UK and register during that transition period, but you can't rely on it. So at this stage, I would say you plan to be in the UK by March 2019 so that you can be part of whatever deal is done for those who are already there, but watch carefully as the deal unfolds, because it may well be that if a transition period is agreed, then you have longer to establish that.
So ideally. And similarly, the situation for UK nationals who live or work abroad or want to in the future, how do you think that will play out?
Well, again, there is no established position yet. It's more difficult because some of the 27 have expressed some political direction in terms of UK nationals, none of which is binding. Some haven't expressed any. Some will just rely on the overall deal. I mean, there are many member states with whom the UK does not have a big exchange of people. But there are estimates vary, but maybe 1.5 million Brits living in Europe. And each of those member states will treat them slightly differently in terms of how they need to register, what sort of forms they have to fill in, whether they have to pay. What will happen is there will be one deal fits all for Europeans in Britain, but there will not be, I think, one deal fits all for Brits in Europe. There will be a basic set of rights bestowed by the deal, and then each member state will probably change those ever so slightly, as indeed they do now. When you go and live in another member state as an EU national, there are different things you have to do. You know, here in Brussels, we have to have an ID card. If you're in Germany, you have to make a certain registration. If you buy a house in France, you have to have a certain... There are different rules. But the overall rights conferred by the Brexit deal, if you like, we don't yet know what they are. The only one thing I would say generally on citizens' rights is I don't think that within all of this maelstrom of politics, misinformation, and in many cases bad feeling, I honestly don't believe that there's any intention on either the UK government or the EU's part of disadvantaging citizens. If there's no deal, i.e., the Brexit cliff, I think the one thing that there will be an understanding on is citizens' rights, because neither side want to use people as a pawn. So what people's rights are in the future, I don't know, but if you've already established residential rights one way or the other, then I think you don't need to worry that everything, you're going to be thrown out overnight or anything. A cliff edge deal is not going to do that, I don't think.
Okay, well that's certainly reassuring.
Well, it's just my view.
So how likely, I know nothing is certain of course, is it that Britain will be in the European Economic Area, or what would you see as the advantages of being in the single market, or the pros and cons?
Well, to me, membership of the single market is an essential part of any post-Brexit scenario, because it basically confers regulatory alignment, which is a huge issue for businesses. It would give the four freedoms. As things stand at the moment, being part of the EEA means free movement of people, so your citizens' issues are not the problems that they could be, free movement of capital, etc. So it would cover, being part of the EEA would really confers almost all of the advantages. And if we had EEA plus, the plus being customs union, then you've virtually got all of the advantages, but you don't have a say. So you would be the classic rule takers, not rule makers. So that's not a satisfactory point of view. From my point of view as an MEP, that's not satisfactory because it means that all the work that I do is no longer required. Having said that, being pragmatic, I would take that as a deal because I think it means that we would continue with the advantages of the EU, and it would maybe satisfy some people who have their problems with the EU. To be honest, I don't think it's going to happen because there are too many people against it.
So a lot of attention has also been going toward the UK and Irish border. Since you are the MEP for Gibraltar, do you think that the Gibraltar border is getting enough attention, especially considering so many Gibraltarians voted to remain? And could a similar workable solution be found for both borders, or are the situations just simply too different to think in terms of similar solutions?
To my knowledge, that the Gibraltar-Spain border has not been brought into any of the discussions. I mean, the Commission and the Member States were very clear that they were taking the Irish requirements, the Irish situation as a touchstone for these negotiations. They were going to deliver what the Irish government wanted. They have never said anything at all like that about Gibraltar. They've merely said that the Spanish government will be consulted. And will have a vote. Well, of course they will, because all the member states will have a vote. So there's no special deal, as far as I'm aware, for the Spanish with Gibraltar. But the Gibraltarians are a very pragmatic people who are quite used to difficulties. But I think they're losing patience with what's happening now because, yes, they're not really getting much. They're not getting much airtime on this. I mean, there are 30,000 Gibraltarians, roughly. It's really, in context, it's not a big deal in terms of population, but it's a massive deal in terms of the psychology of Brexit. Because the irony is, Gibraltar has always been very strongly supported by the UK government and very strongly promoted, for example, in the UK Parliament by a cross-party group who tend to also be Brexiteers. There's a sort of nationalist element, a kind of slightly flag-waving-y kind of nationalist element to their support for Gibraltar. They love Gibraltar because plucky British, blah, blah. And yet, they've really just deserted them, because Brexit is not good for Gibraltar, however you cut it. So, yeah, it's a rather nasty irony there, and I haven't seen any resolution. I think the solution for Gibraltar lies in the negotiations with Spain on the fish. Spanish would like to fish in British waters, and they want to be able to they want their market open to British fish. 66% of all the fish landed in the UK is sold to Spanish housewives. So, you know, there's a clear symbiotic relationship there, and I think that the Spanish will use Gibraltar as a part of the pawn in that negotiation.
What would be your ideal resolution in terms of...
For Gibraltar?
Yeah.
That they get special status and the border remains as it currently is.
Okay.
So the 10,000, 12,000 or so workers who go into Gibraltar every day to work, and not all Spanish nationals, quite a lot of they're nationals from other of the EU 27, but it's cheaper and easier to live in Spain, so they go in and work every day, that they'll be able to continue doing that without any sort of hindrance, and that effectively Gibraltar will carry on as they are. I hope we can resolve that. It's hard to see how.
So in February you quit the ECR group and switched to the EPP group here in the European Parliament. What impact do you think the EPP can have on the Brexit negotiations?
Well, they have an impact simply because they're the biggest group in the Parliament, and they're an active and working part of the Brexit task group in the Parliament. So, as you know, Guy Verhofstadt leads that for the Parliament. He's the lead negotiator, but the EPP have a very strong role in that. So I now have a direct line into that, whereas the ECR, against my better judgment, one of the reasons why I chose to leave the ECR is for some reason they decided they didn't want to be part of the Brexit negotiations. Now, okay, maybe the Brits would decide that, but why did all the other nationalities in the ECR not want to be part of it and negotiate on behalf of their British colleagues? So I think from my point of view, being in the EPP gives me a much stronger platform to be able to influence what happens in the future. Being in the ECR is impotent, really.
Good. Okay. So going forward, we know about the anti-Brexit flash mob that some MEPs are organising at the end of June, and we're wondering what kind of extra parliamentary activities you're doing which relate to Brexit, and also, as obviously this will be like your last term, what you want to achieve by the end of your time in the European Parliament.
Can you actually organise in advance a flash mob? I mean, I thought the point of a flash mob was it kind of, I know they don't spontaneously appear, but if it sort of strikes me as slightly contradictory that we could be having this long planning session for a flash mob. I'm not quite sure. The last thing I heard, it involved dancing in the street, which is not my style. So I might go along and support them. I mean, this is one of the interesting things about being anti-Brexit as a sort of a long-standing, lifelong conservative is that I've been involved in some fairly unusual bits of politicking. So I've been on a couple of marches with banners and whistles and things. And in fact, on this weekend in London is a big anti-Brexit march on the 20th. But it's the anniversary of the referendum, 2 years, and I will be taking part in that. And I'll be marching with a banner, and this is not my normal style. But so I'll go that far. I'm not sure about dancing in a flash mob, but we'll see. But I'm happy to participate in anything that draws attention to the fact that, well, two things. That there's a strong anti-Brexit feeling, not just amongst young people, and although that is strong, but also, some of us oldies don't think it's such a good idea either. So I think I'm very keen to participate in anything that can just make a difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very good.
Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your opinions, your expertise. It's been really great to have you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We hope you enjoyed this second interview in our series of podcasts brought to you by the Schuman Trainees. So please stay tuned for our next episode, which will be released in July.
Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
Goodbye.